Caden Hollis had always loved the quiet of his ranch. The endless stretch of dry plains, the sound of wind rustling through the tall grasses, and the soft mooing of his cattle were all he needed to be content. A rugged cowboy at heart, he had spent years alone, tending to his land on the far edge of the galaxy. He didn't mind the solitude, really. It gave him time to think, to work, and to feel at peace with himself. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky a brilliant orange and red, Caden rode his horse back to the ranch after a long day. He could feel the weariness in his bones, but was used to it. His days were long and often filled with hard work, fixing fences, mending tools, and making sure everything on the farm was running smoothly. It was a simple life, but it was his. As he neared the house, he noticed something strange, a small package sitting on the porch. It wasn't like anything he'd ever received before. The box was ornate, with detailed patterns carved into its surface. There was a small, shiny emblem on the top, a symbol that Caden didn't recognize. His heart skipped a beat. He hadn't ordered anything, and there was no one around for miles. Who could have left it here? Caden dismounted and slowly walked up to the package, his boots kicking up the dust as he moved. He bent down and picked it up, feeling its weight in his hands. It was surprisingly heavy for its size. He turned the box over, looking for a label or any sign of who might have sent it. The only thing he found was the strange emblem, which seemed to glimmer in the dimming light. Curiosity got the better of him, and he opened the box. Inside, nestled in soft velvet, was a letter. The paper was thick, and the handwriting was elegant, almost flowing, as if it were meant for someone important. Caden carefully unfolded it, reading the words that changed everything. Dear Caden Hollis, I hope this letter finds you well. My name is Orson Drake, and I am writing to you with a request. I had arranged for a woman, a mail-order bride, to come to this planet to help me with my estate. However, circumstances have changed, and I'm no longer able to fulfill my part in this arrangement. I regret to inform you that I have had to leave the colony unexpectedly, and I am unable to care for her as originally planned. Her name is Sari, and she is a woman of great intelligence and skill, well suited to the work that I had planned for her. I know you are a man of integrity, and I trust you will take her in until a new arrangement can be made. She is to be treated with respect, and I hope you will offer her the shelter and support she needs during this difficult time. I leave it in your capable hands. Best regards, Orson Drake. Caden stared at the letter, his brow furrowing in confusion. He had no idea who Orson Drake was, other than a name he had heard in passing at the local trading post. The idea of a mail-order bride was something foreign to him, a strange concept from the far-off reaches of the galaxy. He had heard stories of people looking for companionship from other worlds, but he never imagined it would somehow involve him. After reading the letter again, he looked back at the package. It wasn't much, just a letter and a strange request, but there was something about it that seemed genuine. Caden wasn't the type of man to turn away someone in need, especially when it involved a woman left stranded without a place to go. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He had always been alone, and while he wasn't against the idea of having company, he didn't know the first thing about dealing with someone who had come from so far away. He was no diplomat. He wasn't trained to deal with delicate situations like this, but in the end he knew he couldn't just turn her away. He wasn't like that, so he saddled up his horse and rode out to the nearest settlement, where Orson had supposedly made his home. The journey wasn't long, but the further he went, the more he wondered what he was walking into. When Caden finally reached the small compound that had belonged to Orson Drake, it was eerily quiet. No one seemed to be around. The fields that were once tended to were now overgrown, and the house stood dark with no lights shining through the windows. It looked abandoned, just like the letter had described. Caden tied his horse to the hitching post and walked up to the front door. He knocked, but there was no answer. After a moment of hesitation, he tried the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. Inside, it looked like someone had left in a hurry. Personal belongings were scattered about, books, furniture, even clothing that had been hastily abandoned. It was as if Orson had vanished into thin air, and then he heard it. A soft sound, almost like a whisper, coming from the back of the house. Caden's hand instinctively went to the holster at his side, but he quickly reminded himself that he wasn't here for trouble. He was here to help. He made his way down the narrow hall, and that's when he saw her. Sari, She was sitting by a window, staring out at the endless stretch of the plains. Her features were delicate, her hair a deep shade of brown, and her eyes were dark, almost as if they held 1,000 stories she hadn't told. She looked up when she heard him approach, her eyes meeting his with a mix of surprise and caution. "Who are you?" she asked in a soft, almost hesitant voice. There was an edge of fear in her tone, but also something more, something defiant, like she wasn't about to be a helpless damsel in distress. "I'm Caden Hollis," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I came in response to a letter from Orson Drake." Her eyes widened slightly at the mention of Orson's name, but she didn't say anything for a moment. She simply studied him, perhaps weighing whether or not she could trust him. Finally she spoke. "Orson left me," she said, her voice thick with a sadness Caden hadn't expected. "He promised me a new life here, but now he's gone. And I'm stuck." Caden's heart softened. He had expected her to be angry or upset, but the way she said it, it was clear that she didn't want to be a burden to anyone. She simply didn't know what to do now that everything she had planned had fallen apart. "I'm not here to cause you any trouble," Caden said. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay. You're welcome to stay here as long as you need." She looked at him for a long moment before nodding slowly, her shoulders relaxing just a bit. "Thank you," she said quietly, as if the weight of her situation was finally starting to lift just a little. As the days passed, Caden and Sari started to learn about each other's worlds. Caden with his simple, rugged life on the ranch, and Sari with her upbringing in a far-off world of culture and politics. They were so different in many ways, but they also found common ground. They both had dreams, Sari of finding her place in this strange new world, and Caden of living a life with a little less loneliness. But neither of them could have predicted how much their lives would change in the days to come. Their bond was only just beginning to form, and neither of them knew how much it would grow. What they did know, however, was that they weren't alone anymore, and in a place like this that meant more than anything else. As the days passed, life at the ranch slowly began to settle into a rhythm. Caden and Sari worked side by side, learning from one another. Caden taught her how to care for the land, how to mend fences and gather crops, while Sari shared stories of the distant worlds she had visited, her knowledge of different cultures and languages. Caden found her stories fascinating, her intelligence surprising. She had been trained to manage large estates, to communicate with people from all walks of life, and yet, here she was learning how to plant corn and feed livestock. In a way, it was both humbling and impressive to watch. Sari, for her part, was doing her best to adjust to her new life, though it wasn't easy. The hard, dusty work of the ranch felt foreign to her, and her hands, which had once been well cared for, now bore the marks of hard labor. She had never imagined that her life would be so different from what she had been promised. But Caden had shown her nothing but kindness since the moment she arrived, and she started to feel a sense of gratitude toward him. He was a man of few words, but there was something about his quiet strength and gentle ways that made her feel safe. In a strange way, he had become the only anchor she had in this unfamiliar world, but the calm would not last. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows over the ranch, Caden received a message. It was a distress signal, sent from a neighboring settlement. The message was short, but the meaning was clear. The Kraxos were coming. The Kraxos were a mysterious and ruthless alien race, known for their brutality and their interest in human settlements on the outer edges of the galaxy. They had been raiding planets, taking anything of value, resources, technology, and sometimes people. The colonists in Caden's area had heard whispers of their approach, but no one had thought they would come this far out. Now it seemed the Kraxos were closing in on their small, peaceful settlement. Caden's first instinct was to protect his land and the people around him. He was no soldier, but he had grown up on a ranch where survival meant being prepared for anything. He could handle himself in a fight if it came to that. But this wasn't just about defending his ranch anymore. It was about defending the people he had come to care for, including Sari. Sari could see the worry in Caden's eyes as he paced back and forth, the weight of the situation sinking in. She had heard stories of the Kraxos, how they would destroy entire colonies in a matter of days, leaving nothing but ruin behind. But she wasn't a helpless woman. She had knowledge of strategies, diplomacy, and negotiation. She had been trained to deal with difficult situations, and she couldn't just sit idly by while others fought for their lives. I'm not just going to sit here, Sari said, standing up from the chair where she had been sitting. I may not know much about farming, but I know something about dealing with threats. We can't just wait for them to arrive. We need to prepare. Caden looked at her, surprised by the fire in her voice. What do you mean? What can we do against them? We don't have to fight them directly, Sari replied. I know how to communicate with other species. I can try to negotiate with them. If I can understand their motives, maybe we can avoid bloodshed. At first, Caden didn't know what to think. Negotiating with the Kraxos, it seemed impossible. But he also knew that Sari wasn't someone who spoke without thinking things through. She had a way of looking at problems from angles he hadn't considered. Together, they spent the next few days preparing. Caden secured the ranch, making sure that everything was in place in case of an attack. He set up basic defenses, knowing that they wouldn't be able to stop the Kraxos if they arrived in full force. Meanwhile, Sari studied everything she could find about the Kraxos. Ancient texts, trade records, and reports from other settlements that had dealt with them before. She wasn't sure if it would be enough, but she had to try. As the days passed, their bond grew stronger. Caden found himself relying on Sari more and more, not just for her knowledge, but for her support. She wasn't just a woman he had taken in out of obligation. She was someone he could trust, someone he could count on. And as they spent more time together, Caden couldn't deny that he was beginning to feel something more for her. There was a softness in her that made him want to protect her, but there was also a strength that made him respect her more than anyone he had ever met. Then, one day the Kraxos came. It was a dark and stormy night when the attack began. Caden and Sari had just finished securing the final perimeter of the ranch when they saw the flicker of lights on the horizon. At first, Caden thought it might have been a trick of the storm, but as the lights grew brighter and closer, he realized it wasn't just the weather. The Kraxos were here. The first wave of their attack came swiftly. Strange alien ships dropped from the sky, landing in the fields around Caden's ranch. They were massive metallic behemoths, their engines humming with an eerie sound. Caden's heart pounded in his chest as he grabbed his rifle and motioned for Sari to stay inside. But she wouldn't be left behind. She grabbed a communicator and began speaking in a language Caden didn't understand. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice filled with panic. "I'm trying to reach them," Sari said, her tone calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. "I have to talk to them before it's too late." Caden didn't know if it would work, but he wasn't going to stop her. She was his only hope to avoid a full-scale conflict. As the Kraxos' ships hovered above them, casting a shadow over the land, Sari's voice echoed through the communication device. She spoke with authority, trying to reach the Kraxos leaders and explain that they didn't want to fight. For a tense moment, nothing happened. The Kraxos ships remained in place, their cold alien presence looming over the ranch. But then something changed. The ship slowly began to move, shifting positions. The massive doors of one ship opened and a single figure descended from the ramp. The alien was tall and menacing, its features hidden behind a mask of dark, gleaming armor. But when it spoke, it wasn't in the guttural growls that Caden had expected. Instead, it was a deep, measured voice that echoed through the speaker. "You wish to negotiate, human?" the Kraxos leader said. "What could you possibly offer that would interest us?" Sari didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, her voice steady as she spoke. "I offer you peace," she said. "I offer you a deal that benefits both of us. You do not need to destroy this settlement. There is much to be gained if you work with us." The Kraxos leader studied her for a long moment, clearly weighing her words. The air was thick with tension, and Caden's heart raced in his chest. But he trusted Sari. She had a way with words, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, he felt like there might actually be hope. Slowly, the Kraxos leader nodded. "We shall see if your offer is worth considering," he said. "But know this, if you fail to deliver, there will be no mercy." Sari didn't flinch. "I understand," she said. With that, the Kraxos leader turned and retreated into the ship. The other ships followed suit, slowly rising into the air before disappearing into the stormy sky. The immediate danger had passed, but Caden knew they weren't out of the woods yet. The Kraxos were still a threat, but Sari had bought them time. She had managed to convince them to listen. As the storm cleared and the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Caden and Sari stood side by side, looking out at the quiet, empty plains. They had faced an impossible situation and survived. But more importantly, Caden realized that the bond they shared had become something stronger than either of them could have imagined. And maybe, just maybe, in a world full of uncertainty and danger, they had found something worth fighting for.